Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here in the past. Today what I want to go over is a very specific type of journal. This is a medical journal, and I want to discuss why have a specific medical journal versus just keeping information in perhaps your everyday carry. Also, I just want to go over with you some layouts that I'm using and tell you a little bit about the resources. So I'm going to start out though with telling you about why I'm using this medical journal. First of all, the specifics of why use a dedicated medical journal versus keeping information to everyday carry. Well, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using this to track my mother's health. My mother is diabetic. She's had a stroke, 2 strokes. And actually that's part of why if you don't know, I was living in New York City, and that's why I'm in Florida now. I came down here at the end of January to take care of my mother. She unfortunately had a car accident, and then she had a stroke while she was at the accident. And then she went to the hospital. They thought, you know, she's recovered, she looks great. Maybe it wasn't a stroke, it was just stroke-like symptoms. But 6 hours after being released in the middle of the night, my mother unfortunately suffered a second stroke. So since then, that was the end of January, I've been down here on family medical leave in Florida, taking care of my mother. And the whole topic of a specific medical journal versus using an everyday carry. Well, I was using my everyday carry at first, and it was really not going so well at all. Let me see if I can find it. I was just having trouble keeping track because I used my journal like I was using my journal as I was in the hospital for how I usually journal. And usually I have a brain dump page towards the very beginning here. And I wasn't set up for taking care of something that is a specific, like, chronic type of illness. Here I was trying to keep track of things here in my, what I call my hustle or brain dump type of page. And I think what ended up happening was I ended up having like just little things written here or there, and I couldn't find anything, and it wasn't helping me to remember anything. And eventually what ended up happening is my mother was released from rehab, and then I began to see 2 things happen. The one thing that happened is I noticed the need to be able to have all of her medical information in one place. And something that I think that's important, whether you keep this for a loved one or for yourself, if you have a medical journal, that one of the things in the beginning of this journal, by the way, this is I'll just throw it out there that this is a Chic Sparrow Waypoint A6, and I'm using a hardbound Scribbles That Matters in A6. So in the past, there's a key here, but I'm not using the key. But for the first time ever, I'm actually successfully using the index. So a good reason to have a specific medical journal is here's some of the things that I'm keeping in this journal. Personal information, page 1. So under personal information, what I have is I have my mother's, her name and her information, and I have my brother, who is her power of attorney, his name and information, and my name and information, and that I am the primary caregiver. So this is my mother, this is my brother, her power of attorney, and this is me, her primary caretaker. So then also in the index, I have her medical history. I have a doctor and therapist contact information, her medications, and then I start my month. And so let's say, and this is what I realized from, I don't know where I heard this or somebody, it was definitely somewhere online, most likely in social media, but whether it was something like YouTube or Facebook, I couldn't say. So I'm sorry I can't give credit to the source where this came from, but a woman had shared that I guess a loved one, something had happened, that person was having an attack of some sort, an episode, and at the time when the medics showed up, you know, you're kind of overwhelmed emotionally with fear of, you know, what is your loved one is going through. Are they okay? What is happening? Or they're in pain, or just that you're, you know, you may not be able to hold it together. Now, my background, because of the type of work, what I do, I think I could probably hold it together pretty damn well. Oh, sorry for my swearing, pretty well. But I realized the importance of having this type of information, my personal history, the medical history. Like, let's say I was actually transporting my mother somewhere to a doctor's office and we had an accident, that I have this book in here, and I should actually write on here, personal medical journal. And it has contact information. I'll have to write my mother's name up in here. That it has her medical history, her allergies. I wrote her diagnosis, her hospitalizations, her injuries, and I wrote in here about vision as well. So, you know, if something happens and I'm with my mother, or if something happens and I'm feeling overwhelmed emotionally, not able to communicate, which it could happen. It could happen because I love my mother a lot, and I could see myself possibly breaking down and crying because I feared the moment intensely of my mother passing away. So if something happens and she's unconscious, I might actually flip. But so let's say I'm not able to hold it together and I flip. All her information is here. The type of operations, hospitalizations that she's had, diagnoses, and where to find that is here in the index. Okay, I've written the page numbers down. So if I needed to, I could give this book to EMT and say her information is here, it's here, it's in here, and here are her doctors, and it says primary care physician. And I've left myself space to fill in more information. So I have like surgeons in here. I have other health therapists in here. And then I've written down, here is a list of her medications, and there's space for more medications. And also I've used really the bullet journal method by writer Carol for how I've set up my index. So medications, it has a dash, but what I can do is just put a comma, and then when this page is done, if I start new medications in January, in April, let's say, I can write the next page that also, so there'll be all the pages, any pages that have the medications on there, it'll have the number next to it. Okay, so I think that explains some of the basics. So what I actually did, how I got this information, is first of all, I went online and I'm like, hey, because I know other people have done medical journals. I was like, what kind of information did you put in it? And I didn't get too much response. Basically, they were like, hey, Google it. And I deserve that. But what I did is I Googled it, and I was like, important or, you know, important medical information a person should keep track of, something like that. Or the information that EMTs request when they arrive on site, or even from my own experience, I thought about what type of information that they should have. I think some people did give me a couple suggestions. So that's how I came up with the personal. That's how I came up, was from the online site, online research, that to write a medical history, to write your doctor's, primary doctor's phone numbers, your physicians, and your medications. And as the medications change, which they have or could, then I update that as well. Let me see if I find a nice, oh, here's a black pen. As a matter of fact, 15 milligrams, aspirin 81, Tylenol 500 milligrams at 8 hours. Okay, so that's 3 times daily. So I could have written that one in pencil, because what happened is, unfortunately, my mother had a fall and she was injured. So for the pain, she's also taking Tylenol. So it's important to have literally everything. I think the other thing that's missing from here is I don't have my mother's multivitamins on here. Literally, it is good to have everything, even if it's vitamins. So I think I've explained why have a specific medical journal versus why just put information in your everyday carry. I think that if you don't have someone that has, if you don't have a chronic illness, or if you're not caring for someone that does have some type of high risks, medical risks, then maybe it's not necessary for you to have a medical journal. But if you yourself or someone you care for does have some type of higher risk, whether it's a high risk to, you get the idea, something that's more in the high risk, or something that's chronic, or something that needs to be, it could be even mental health, not just physical health, that could be something that you may feel is important to document and to track. Okay, so instead of just keeping it in my everyday journal, which was definitely not working for me, it was very unsuccessful. I couldn't find where I had the information. I was just jotting things down real quick, kind of randomly, and I wasn't tracking or being able to track anything. And since my mother has diabetes, I thought that was important. And she does tend to have a lot of appointments too, medical related. So what I have is I made a March calendar, and I write my mother's appointments here in the March calendar. I write them right into the boxes, and I put this little piece of scientific washi tape on the edge so I can see where that month starts. And then this is a resource. This is a chart, what I want to share with you. So something you could do is you can use, I use it this way, my A6 for her appointments. Sometimes the appointments don't all fit in here, and I figured if I needed to, I could always use this space off to the side. If there was double appointments, there's extra space here where I could write extra notes. But I've made it work for me in here pretty well. I highlighted because something was canceled. Then I have two types of charts that I'm using inside this journal. One of them is, as I said, my mother is diabetic, and the diabetes over the many years has unfortunately gotten worse and worse. I mean, but this happens, it can happen, it doesn't have to happen. You can control it, but it has happened over the past decades that my mother's diabetes got worse. And so what I did is I created a chart to track my mother's blood sugar levels. So I got this idea, actually came from, and I will link it down below in my description box, Pinecone Papers. I found a YouTube video where this person tracks their chronic health illness, and what I did was actually this chart, which is about pain levels and fatigues. This is a monthly chart, and this blood sugars chart was inspired from this. So what I've done, if for diabetes specifically and tracking my mother's blood sugar, is that I put the dates across the top here, and I'm going to change how this is, but here at the top I have morning, it says afternoon, it says evening, and then if I took a reading, I put a check mark. And what I have is here in the center is a chart showing whether her blood sugar was low, good, or high. Next month I'll move this little section and I'll put it to the top. I mean, this is what's wonderful about the bullet journal method, is how you can adapt it for yourself. So I was adapting this kind of from this chart that I got from Pinecone Papers. And as I was creating it, I realized the flaw, and I said, that's okay, I'm going to work with this for this month, and next month I'll know how to do it better. So next month I will lay out this chart, which if you look here, you can see my mother's blood sugar has been fantastic for like the last 2 weeks. So it looks here like it's low, but it's not. Actually, that's where it's high. There was 3 days that it was particularly high, and that's something that I'll change. When I wrote this, I wrote low, good, and high. And then an afterwards, hindsight, I saw that it would make more sense to put high at the top, the good in the middle, and then the low at the bottom, because visually that makes more sense. But so I'm like, okay. By the time I realized that, I had already started, and I said, I'm not going to go and white everything out. I know what it is, and I'll do it different. the other thing that I said would have made a difference for me is if I had moved this up here, because this up here says morning reading, and then here is where I put what the reading was. This is the afternoon reading, and this is the evening reading. So next month I'll move the morning reading down here, and it'll be morning, afternoon, and evening. And also what started is at first I was writing the numbers. So my mom's number on this day was 2:24 in the morning. Yeah, and that's not good. That's not good. But I was writing it 224, you know, like this. So I realized actually their nurse came and said she didn't understand. She was like, what? She thought it was 213 because she was reading left to right and I was reading top to bottom. So on this date, I said, you know what? The nurse is right. It makes more sense. So I started writing it so that I could read it like this. Okay, so all of these numbers are like this. So it's been working out great. I love this chart. The nurse comes to visit. She asks me how my mom's blood sugar is, and I tell her what the lows were, what the highs were, and if something was high, like I think on this day it was high, and I told her, yeah, we forgot to take medications. So I'm like, that's kind of my fault. You know, it's like anything else, building a habit, it takes time. This chart I got from Pinecone Papers, and I love it, and I will be doing it again. And from using it this month, I have learned how to make it my own. I literally took her layout, and if you want to see her stuff, all you have to do is to sign up for her newsletter. There's no charge, and it's free, no charge, free. And I mean, if you don't like her newsletter, which she does not spam you, I think I've gotten like one thing from her in the whole month. So, you know, if you're interested in tracking your own personal medical information, or for someone else, definitely go and check out, and you can see her site, and I think you'll be able to figure out how to adapt it for your own personal needs. So on here she had, it's the same thing. It's a chart with the day and the dates up here, and this part says pain level and this says fatigue, and she does a 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 is low, 3 is high for pain level and for fatigue. Now I didn't go and connect the dots, but I guess I can do that towards the end of the month. But then down here there was a whole list of things, and a lot of them are from her. I think that one, one or two of these are things that I added in, and then here at the end of the month I had my aha moment of what are the things I'm really more interested in tracking specifically for with my mother. So I think some of these, they might go away or they might not go away, but I know that what are the things that I need to add that really will help me more with my mom. Then after that, what I did is I did a weekly. The weeklies, I just put my little scientific tape at the top. And again, the weeklies have actually been helpful. Sometimes I'm redundant and I write in appointments, but also I will write in some specific notes at times if I need to. And then I've also been doing some dailies. So in this instance, I had a doctor's appointment. And so with my dailies, what I did is I wrote down anything that I needed to ask, or questions or concerns that I wanted to go over with the doctor, so that I wanted to make sure I didn't leave there and they'd say, oh crap, I forgot to tell her about this, or I forgot to ask about that. And then I took some notes on information that the doctor had given me about with my mom's medical health. And then this piece of paper actually can be thrown out. It was information that the doctor's office gave me that I needed to contact the wheelchair company and also orthopedic surgeon, and they gave me direct numbers, and I took it eventually and I did put it in there and transferred the information. And so sometimes what would happen is so I would write dailies, but not necessarily. In this case, there are a lot of days where I did write notes, but in this case I did. It was like the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th. I wrote notes every day, but that's because we had a doctor's appointment. Something was happening. How I used my dailies is also that I could make a note, like I said, mental note, like I had to increase my mother's medication. With diabetes, sometimes you have to be a little flexible with the medication. In my mother's case, at least I had to be, had to adjust it. And I did speak with the doctor about that. And Also made some other notes about some other medication that I was waiting for from my brother to pick up for us, for my mother. When the physical therapist came, I would write notes about what the exercises were they wanted my mother to do. So the dailies came in handy for writing notes about which therapist came, when they came, what they did, any notes that's something that when I added medications, I wrote that in. I wrote little notes. So I kept using that pattern with the weeks. And here, this is actually community resources in North Central Florida. And again, I went and I put that in here because it was a little bit, it's related to my mother's medical care, but it isn't something that's like specific March. It's something that I may need to go back to in the coming months. As a matter of fact, I do need to go back to it, which is part of why I made sure to put it in the index so I can find it easier. One of the things I love about Scribbles That Matters, it already has the pages numbered. So yes, that was great. So that kind of really covers, that's I think the last thing. When I reorder medications, I also keep track of that. And any kind of incidents or things that may happen, not necessarily could be with the person you're caring for, your loved one, but it could also be with people providing services that I record that and I note that. Like I had something happen with reordering medications. I had something with a therapist that had canceled, and Medicaid and insurance companies, whichever you're dealing with. Generally, when you have some type of a serious health illness and if you're getting some type of therapy, those number of visits may be limited based on whatever your insurance you have, whether that's Medicaid or something private. So if you lose a visit, it's going to, you need to let people know so that you can make sure you're advocating for your loved one as best as possible so that they can get all of the visits that they're actually allotted for, and of course increase their recovery. So things like that are important to note in here as well. So that is what I'm doing with this medical journal, and that is the end of going over this. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you found that useful. Do you use a medical journal? If you do, I'd really love to know, how are you using it? And, any kind of pointers you might have for me of other information that you think might be really important, because this is new for me, but I realize there's obviously a lot of people out there that either do care for a loved one or that they themselves have some type of chronic illness or mental health issues that they have to keep track of, which very honestly is a big part of how I got into journaling every day. Is I went through a very serious depression, and my journaling was a big part of my self-care. So in some ways, journaling and keeping track of my mother's well-being in this journal has helped me come back to journaling, because I was struggling in this everyday journal the month of February. It was a little bit hard, and I wasn't really being able to even journal, and I found a way to journal again, and in some ways it helps me. It helps to relieve my stress. It's bringing back a regularity, a normality, a new normal for my life, caring for someone 24/7, as opposed to being at work and just like all of you dealing with this coronavirus, with this coronavirus while you're caring for an elderly person with a damaged immune system. So yeah, it's a lot, but I'm going to end it there, and I am going to say, wherever this meets you at, that I hope you are well, whether that is morning, afternoon, or night. Take care and be safe, and I hope you found this helpful. See you again soon.